Yeah, the wet tyres.
Right. Okay. So basically, right. So let's begin. So in Harama, back in testing, concerns were initially raised. However, by that point, only two drivers had actually done any testing in the wet, and that was the Jag boys, Mitch and
Yep.
Nick. They both said, even back at that point, not a chance it will happen. Fast forward to Sao Paulo, and of course, we had the massive downpour on the Thursday evening,
Yep.
and it was, I've never seen rain quite like it, which obviously led to a lot of people asking, well, what we could do if it rains.
Yep.
I went back and spoke to the Jag boys and said, look, has anything changed? They said no. Several other drivers, one of them being Sandberg, said as well, no. If it's wet, we simply cannot race. That obviously then led to a piece on drivers raising concerns that a wet race could lead to Brazil being cancelled. Obviously, it ended up being dry.
Yep.
As we then saw in, quite a deep breath, as we then saw in Mexico City. So for pretty much then 90% of the grid, FP2 was their first experience of driving the new cars in the wet on the new tyres. And it looked awful at the start. It was, I know lap times in the end were only about, I think, 20 seconds off what they were doing in FP1.
Yep.
But it was embarrassing. I think it looked almost, apologies for this noise, by the way.
No, you're good.
It was not just slow, it was shockingly slow. There was no grip.
And it didn't look that wet.
It's the thing that's really bizarre, and I can't get my head around, is how to Hankook design a softer tyre, which is still grooved and should work in all weather, but doesn't work in all weather. When it got towards the end of FP2, it was okay. There was more grip. Drivers could push a bit more. But if we get a properly wet race, if you think of London wet from season 9, not a chance that happens. To be honest, if it was to be how wet it was at the start of FP2 for a qualifying or a race, it wouldn't be safe. It's as simple as that. So drivers are going to have questions for Hankook, as are the media.
Yep.
But obviously, a lot of that now won't be asked until driver briefing in Saudi Arabia.
In Jeddah, yeah, of course, yeah. So I'm surprised. Hankook, knowing that this is it's an all-weather tyre. It's an all-weather tyre. It's supposed to run in the dry and the wet. Yeah. And if it can't run in the wet, then they've made an error in what they've done, and they need to be held accountable for it. And that's why I know. There was a Hankook press conference. Go on, say that again.
It's a weird one because ultimately, this is the last FE tyre they're ever going to develop.
Yeah, 100%.
They've gone for so. Of course, they'll care, but at the same time, if they get criticism or anything, it's not really going to affect them in any way. It's not like they're going to be back in single-seater motorsport anytime soon.
I suppose.
So it's an interesting one to find. But if you look back at FE's history, thankfully, I think you can probably count on one hand how many fully wet races we've had.
Not many.
I don't think it's even we've had. I think London
Paris
might be the only
season
one.
5, obviously.
But Paris started dry, didn't it?
Yes, it did start dry.
So we've never had one apart from London. That's
but it did rain. It did rain properly though in Paris.
Yeah, but we've never had from start to finish one entirely wet race. Obviously, Berlin lost 2 seasons ago. We had also the fully wet qualifying.
Yeah,
but it's just. When you think
that red flag London was probably the only wet race that we've had,
it's when you think that, Mexico's the place where actually that there is at the majority of corners a lot of runoff.
Yeah.
Looking for a Tokyo, for example, not a chance. A London, not a chance. Berlin, not. It's just they've got to find a solution now because I don't quite understand what we're going to do if we have a fully wet qualifying or race. Free practice, you can take it or leave it. The drivers can just crawl around if need to be. You look at the Jag boys, they did minimal laps. But if it comes to a qualifying of the race, what are you going to do if the drivers actually have zero grip? Jake Dennis was complaining several times saying that there's no point even going out. It's just, you're just risking locking up every time you touch the brakes.
Yep.
So, again, this problem is only going to arise if we have further wet sessions. That's obviously going to be the big thing looking forward. Thankfully, that's probably not going to happen in Jeddah.